Los Angeles, 1937, late afternoon. The blinds in Louis B. Mayer's office are half drawn, cutting the California sun into thin, surgical lines across the carpet. Dust hangs in the light like it's afraid to move. The air smells faintly of cigar smoke and furniture polish. No windows are open. Robert Taylor is already standing when Mayer walks in. No handshake. Just a glance. Mayer closes the door himself. That detail matters. He never closes doors himself unless the conversation is not meant to exist. At the far end of the room, a young publicist sits with a legal pad balanced neatly on her knees. She keeps her eyes down. She does not greet Taylor. She does not smile. There is no small talk. Mayer walks slowly to his desk. He doesn't sit immediately. He studies Taylor the way a man studies a horse he's already purchased but isn't sure he can control. The silence stretches. Then Mayer says almost casually, "You were quiet at dinner." Not a question. A statement. The dinner had taken place the night before at the Trocadero. A private table, a studio fixer, two columnists who owed MGM favors, and Taylor, the studio's rising star, clean jawline, blue eyes, the kind of face that sold certainty in uncertain times. At some point in that dinner, one of the fixers had leaned back and joked about morals, about loyalty, about how the studio always protects its boys as long as its boys understand the rules. Everyone laughed. Except Robert Taylor. He had lifted his glass. He had said nothing. Now in this office, that silence has followed him. Mayer finally sits, slow, controlled. He folds his hands on the desk. "You didn't laugh," Mayer continues, voice level. Taylor doesn't rush to respond. He doesn't fidget. He doesn't offer apology. He simply meets Mayer's eyes. That is the mistake. In 1937, MGM is not just a studio, it is a machine. It manufactures fame, it manufactures marriages, it manufactures scandals and then buries them. Actors are under contract. Their image belongs to the studio. Their private lives are assets to be managed. Mayer built that system. He built it with paternal language. My boys, my girls. But underneath it was leverage, morality clauses, suspension threats, quiet transfers to less prestigious projects, career slowdowns that never appeared on paper. He expects deference. He expects gratitude. What he does not expect is resistance in silence. Mayer tilts his head slightly. "You understand," he says carefully, "how important it is that we all move in the same direction." Again, not a question. Taylor nods once. But he doesn't elaborate. The publicist's pencil scratches across paper. The sound is sharp in the quiet room. Mayer leans back. There it is again. That silence. Taylor is not arguing, not confessing, not defending himself. He is simply not participating in the performance. And in Hollywood in 1937, refusing to perform is dangerous. Mayer's power does not rely on shouting. He is known to explode, yes, but the real decisions happen when he lowers his voice. Like now. "You're under a very good contract," Mayer says. "We've invested in you." A pause. "We expect loyalty." Taylor inhales slowly. The room feels smaller. "I'm loyal to my work," he replies. Careful words. Too careful. The wrong kind of careful. Mayer's expression does not change, but something behind his eyes closes. Work. Not the studio. Not the family. Work. The distinction lands heavily. MGM does not sell work, it sells identity. And Robert Taylor is beginning to sound like a man who believes he owns his own. The blinds shift slightly as a car passes outside. A brief flicker of light crosses Mayer's face. "You're a smart young man," Mayer says. Silence again. Then softer. "Smart men understand when something is offered as a courtesy. The threat is almost invisible." The dinner joke had not been random. It had been a signal, an invitation to play along, to accept that the studio would shape the narrative of his personal life, arrange what needed arranging, protect what needed protecting. All he had to do was laugh. He didn't. Now Mayer studies him like a problem. There are rumors already circulating about Taylor, about friendships, about private habits that don't align cleanly with the masculine image MGM wants to project. Nothing proven, nothing printable, but enough that the studio prefers clarity. Clarity can be arranged. Marriages can be arranged. Appearances can be controlled. But only if the actor cooperates. Mayer drums his fingers once against the desk, a small sound deliberate. You're being given opportunities most men would beg for, he says. Don't misunderstand the generosity. The publicist's pencil stops moving. Taylor's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. He could apologize now. He could say he was tired, distracted, misunderstood the joke. He could laugh retroactively. Instead, he says nothing. Again, the silence is no longer neutral, it is a refusal. And Mayer understands something in that moment. Robert Taylor is grateful. He is ambitious. But he is not pliable. That changes everything. Mayer stands abruptly walking around the desk, not close enough to invade space, just close enough to assert dominance. We can help you, he says quietly, or we can help someone else. That's it. No raised voice. No direct threat. Just the reminder that careers at MGM do not belong to the actors who appear on the posters. They belong to the man standing in front of him. Taylor holds his gaze. Still silent. The publicist resumes writing. Mayer waits. 3 seconds. 5. 7. Then he nods once, as if a decision has been confirmed internally. Very well, he says. He steps back toward his desk. You may go. No resolution. No reassurance. Just dismissal. Taylor turns toward the door. His hand rests on the handle for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. He leaves without looking back. The door closes with a soft click. Inside the office, the room exhales. Mayer does not immediately sit. He looks at the publicist. Make a note, he says calmly, we'll discuss long-term positioning. Long-term positioning. Not punishment. Not discipline. Positioning. The kind that reshapes a life. Outside, Robert Taylor walks down the MGM corridor lined with framed posters of smiling faces. He doesn't know it yet. But the machine has just shifted around him. And it will never shift back. The next morning, nothing appears different. Robert Taylor arrives on set at stage 14. Technicians move lights into place. Makeup artists powder his jawline. A wardrobe assistant adjusts the shoulders of a tailored jacket. Everything feels routine. That is how the system works. When MGM decides to alter the course of a life, it does not do so dramatically. It does not announce corrections. It adjusts temperature, gradually. At first, the signs are subtle. A script he had been promised quietly goes to someone else. No explanation, just scheduling complications. A meeting with a director is postponed, then rescheduled, then reassigned. Taylor notices. He says nothing. He understands power. He grew up far from Hollywood's illusion in Nebraska, raised by a doctor who believed in discipline and presentation. Taylor had learned early that control is not loud, it is steady, silent. But this is a different kind of control. This one smiles while it rearranges your future. 2 weeks after the office meeting, Taylor receives an invitation to lunch, not from Mayer, from Eddie Mannix. Mannix is MGM's enforcer. Officially, he is a production executive. Unofficially, he is the man who solves problems before they become headlines. Affairs disappear under his supervision. Arrests are handled. Witnesses are persuaded. If Mayer is the patriarch, Mannix is the quiet blade. They meet at the Brown Derby, not in a private room, in public. Visibility is part of the message. Mannix is cordial, warm even. You're doing well, he says, stirring his coffee. The studio's pleased. Taylor nods. But Mannix continues, there's talk. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. In 1937, gossip is currency. Studios own reporters through favors and access. Columnists like Hedda Hopper and Lowella Parsons shape public perception with a single paragraph. A whisper can become narrative. Mannix leans slightly forward. The public likes certainty, he says. They like to know who they're rooting for. A pause. And the studio likes clarity. There it is again. Clarity. Taylor understands what is being offered. A solution. An arrangement. A public romance, perhaps, a carefully timed engagement, a marriage that stabilizes perception. In old Hollywood, marriages are not always romantic, they are strategic, contracts with rings. Mannix doesn't threaten him, he outlines benefits. You could be the next Gable, he says calmly, but Gable knows how to play the game. Play the game. The phrase lingers. Taylor had thought talent was enough, that professionalism would shield him. But professionalism without obedience is a liability. Is this about dinner? Taylor asks finally. Mannix smiles faintly. It's about alignment. Again, no direct accusation. But the memory returns clearly. The joke about loyalty. The room waiting for him to laugh. His silence. Mannix finishes his coffee. There are actresses who would benefit from association, he says. Strong women, clean reputations, the public responds well to symmetry. Symmetry. Meaning masculine leading man paired with luminous female star. Photographed, interviewed, stabilized. Taylor stares at the tablecloth for a moment. What if I don't want symmetry? He asks quietly. Mannix's expression does not change. That's the beauty of this town, he says. Want doesn't enter into it. The lunch ends politely. No raised voices. No visible conflict. But when Taylor returns home that evening, the silence in his house feels heavier than the silence in Mayer's office. The machine is moving. Over the next months, the pressure becomes architectural. He is cast repeatedly in roles that emphasize traditional masculinity. Soldiers, cowboys, stoic heroes, the image tightens around him like tailored fabric. Publicity photographs increase. Studio-arranged interviews emphasize his values, his admiration for American strength, his appreciation for wholesome women. The narrative is forming. Then comes Barbara Stanwyck. A real actress, intelligent, respected, strong. Their relationship begins authentically enough, there is mutual admiration, but there is also timing, studio approval, photographers conveniently present at dinners. MGM does not invent feelings. It frames them. The engagement is announced with efficiency. Columnists praise the union, headlines use words like stability, respectability. The rumor's quiet. Inside the studio, Mayer is satisfied. Not because Taylor complied verbally, but because he complied structurally. The silence in that office has been replaced by alignment. Yet something has shifted permanently. Taylor feels it. Opportunities return, scripts improve, his ascent continues. But the boundaries are now visible. He understands that his career exists within an invisible fence. Every public appearance is measured, every association monitored. And the memory of that office meeting lingers. He remembers the exact tone Mayer used when he said, "We can help you, or we can help someone else." It was not anger. It was arithmetic. The realization settles slowly. He had not been punished. He had been repositioned. Years later, Taylor would publicly embrace conservative politics, support causes that reinforced traditional masculinity, align himself with anti-communist sentiment in Hollywood. Some of it may have been conviction, but part of it was architecture. Once the machine decides who you are, stepping outside that frame is no longer simple. The cost rises. By the early 1940s, Taylor is one of MGM's most reliable leading men. Clean, controlled, profitable. Mayer rarely mentions the 1937 meeting again. He doesn't need to. But every time Taylor enters that office, there is a subtle reminder in Mayer's gaze. You chose. You aligned. And alignment has consequences. The fear is no longer immediate. It is ambient. Taylor's marriage to Stanwyck eventually fractures under the strain of careers and expectations, publicly dignified, privately complicated. The studio does not interfere as aggressively anymore. The objective was achieved years earlier. Containment. What makes the 1937 meeting dangerous is not what was said. It is what was understood. Taylor had tested the perimeter of his autonomy with a single silence. Mayer responded not with fury but with redesign. By the end of the decade, Robert Taylor is a star. But he is also something else. Proof that the most effective form of control is not punishment. It is direction. And once a man understands that his trajectory can be altered without visible force, he begins to monitor himself. The machine no longer needs to threaten him. He carries the boundaries internally. Late one evening in 1942, after a long day of filming, Taylor reportedly lingered alone on a soundstage long after the crew had left. The lights were off, the set hollow and artificial in the dark. He stood there quietly. No cameras, no studio executives, no publicists, just a man in a constructed world. The question wasn't whether he was successful. The question was whether the silence in 1937 had truly been his choice, or the moment it stopped being one. By the mid-1940s, Robert Taylor is exactly what MGM wanted him to be. Reliable, disciplined, bankable. His face appears in war dramas and patriotic features, his posture is upright, his voice carries authority. He is presented as the embodiment of American steadiness in unstable times. And yet something about him has hardened. It shows in interviews. He chooses words carefully, too carefully. He laughs when expected, no hesitation now. The machine has done its work. Louis B. Mayer continues to preside over MGM like a benevolent monarch. He speaks about family, loyalty, stability, the illusion holds. But beneath it, the power structure remains unchanged. Actors are assets. Reputation is currency. And silence is a signal. In 1947, when the House Un-American Activities Committee begins its investigations into alleged communist influence in Hollywood, something happens that feels eerily familiar. The room is different. The stakes are larger. But the atmosphere is the same. A panel, authority seated higher than the witness, a request for alignment. Robert Taylor testifies. He speaks firmly about anti-communist beliefs. He distances himself from colleagues who had been accused. He aligns with prevailing power. Some saw it as conviction. Others saw calculation. What is undeniable is this: he does not hesitate. There is no dangerous silence this time. No refusal to participate in the performance. He answers questions, he names impressions, he reinforces expectations. The lesson from 1937 echoes. Alignment protects. Silence when misread invites correction. The irony is quiet. The same industry that once managed his image now faces its own reckoning with power. Careers are reshaped, some destroyed, not through shouting but through institutional decision. Blacklist. A word that operates like Mayer's old phrase. Long-term positioning. The consequences are rarely loud, they are procedural. And Taylor understands procedure. By then, his marriage to Barbara Stanwyck has ended, publicly respectful, privately worn down. Stanwyck, fiercely independent, never fit comfortably inside MGM's paternal structure. She built her career with different instincts, more self-direction, less reliance on studio narrative. Their separation is handled without scandal. Again, containment. Taylor remarries later, continues working steadily through the 1950s. Westerns, war films, roles that reinforce the persona constructed around him years earlier. He never publicly criticizes Mayer. He never references that afternoon in 1937. But those who observed him closely describe a man who kept himself measured. Guarded. The transformation was not explosive. It was incremental. And that is what makes it unsettling. The defining moment of his career was not a premiere, not an award, not even a contract signing. It was a silence in an office with half-drawn blinds. A refusal to laugh at a joke designed as a test. And the realization that power does not need to humiliate you to control you. It only needs to identify where you resist. Louis B. Mayer's era at MGM eventually ends. In 1951, he is forced out after corporate restructuring and internal power shifts. Even patriarchs are replaceable. When he leaves, there is no dramatic collapse of the studio system overnight, but the tone changes, the old paternal language fades. Hollywood evolves. Contracts loosen. Actors gain more autonomy in the decades that follow. But the blueprint Mayer perfected does not disappear. It simply adapts. Robert Taylor dies in 1969 at the age of 57. In obituaries, he is remembered as handsome, professional, patriotic. Few mention tension. Fewer mention fear. Because the fear in this story was never public. It existed in glances, in carefully chosen words, in a dinner joke that wasn't really a joke, and in the understanding that the most dangerous men in Hollywood rarely raised their voices. They rearranged lives quietly. If you step back, the moment in 1937 becomes almost invisible. There was no shouting match, no contract torn in half, no scandal printed the next morning. Just a young actor who didn't laugh, and a studio head who noticed. From that point forward, Taylor's path narrowed in subtle ways, not into failure, into success. But success on defined terms. That is the paradox. Power rarely needs to destroy you. It prefers to own the direction of your ascent. Imagine the room again. Blinds half drawn. Dust in the light. A publicist writing on a legal pad. Mayor saying, "We can help you," or "We can help someone else." In that moment, Robert Taylor faced a choice that never appeared on paper. Defy quietly and risk erasure. Or align and be elevated. He chose alignment. The cost was invisible. And that is why the story lingers. Because most people imagine power as loud, obvious, dramatic. But in old Hollywood, power was patient. It waited for you to reveal yourself in the smallest way. A laugh withheld. An answer delayed. A silence that lasted just a little too long. And then it adjusted your life accordingly. There are no surviving transcripts of that office meeting. No recording. No official memo outlining the decision. Only patterns. Careers reshaped with surgical precision. Images refined. Reputations sealed. The true fear of that afternoon was not that Robert Taylor would lose everything. It was that he would keep everything. On someone else's terms. And once you understand that, the story does not end in 1937. It echoes through every era where opportunity comes wrapped in conditions. Where laughter is expected. Where silence is measured. And where the most powerful sentence in the room is the one never spoken aloud. The blinds close. The door shuts. The machine continues. Quietly.